They called her just a cook, dismissed her as nothing more than another face behind the serving line at Mountain Ridge Correctional Facility. The inmates barely glanced at her weathered hands as she ladled portions of mashed potatoes and overcooked vegetables onto their trays. The guards treated her like furniture, invisible background noise in their daily routines of headcounts and contraband searches. Even the warden forgot her name, referring to her simply as kitchen staff in his reports to the State Corrections Department. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But Sarah Chen had steady hands that had once adjusted rifle scopes in the mountains of Afghanistan, calculating wind speed and distance with mathematical precision that meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Those same hands now stirred industrial-sized pots of soup and kneaded bread dough for 700 inmates, carrying secrets that would have shattered every assumption about the quiet woman who arrived at 4 in the morning and left after evening cleanup. In exactly 43 minutes, those hands would line up the most important shot of her life, an impossible 300-yard precision strike through a kitchen window that would save 47 innocent people from execution-style murders. The woman they underestimated, mocked, and ignored was about to remind everyone why the military had once called her Ghost 7, and why some skills never fade, even when buried beneath years of deliberate anonymity and the comfortable lie of ordinary life. Mountain Ridge Correctional Facility sprawled across 200 acres of Colorado wilderness, surrounded by razor wire and guard towers that cast long shadows across the exercise yards. Built into the mountainside like a concrete fortress, it housed maximum security inmates whose crimes had earned them decades behind bars, far from the civilized world they had violated with their violence. The facility's kitchen operated with military precision out of necessity, feeding nearly 700 inmates 3 meals a day, while maintaining strict security protocols that governed every knife, every utensil, every piece of equipment that could potentially become a weapon in the wrong hands. Industrial refrigerators hummed constantly, their massive doors sealed with magnetic locks that required 2-person authorization to open during non-meal hours. Meet Sarah Chen, 42 years old, with graying brown hair pulled back in a regulation hairnet that had seen better days. Her face bore the weathered look of someone who had spent years in harsh climates, small lines around her eyes that spoke of squinting through desert heat and mountain snow. She wore the standard-issue white uniform of kitchen staff, stained with years of food service and laundered so many times the fabric had lost its original texture. Her work boots were practical steel-toed models that met safety requirements, scuffed from countless hours standing on industrial kitchen floors. A small identification badge hung from a retractable cord, displaying her employee number and a photograph that captured none of the intelligence behind her dark eyes. To anyone who bothered to look, she appeared exactly as she intended. Forgettable, unremarkable, just another state employee serving her time until retirement. Nobody at Mountain Ridge knew that Sarah had spent 8 years as a Marine Corps sniper, earning 3 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star before medical discharge, following an improvised explosive device blast that left her with hearing damage in her left ear and chronic pain in her right shoulder. Nobody knew that she held the unofficial record for longest confirmed kill in Afghanistan, a shot taken at nearly 800 yards in conditions that meteorologists would have declared impossible for precision shooting. Her personnel file listed her previous employment as food service and, quote, restaurant management, technical truths that revealed nothing about the 18 months she had spent providing overwatch for special operations teams in hostile territory. The background check had found no red flags, no criminal history, no associations with extremist groups or gang affiliations that would disqualify her from working in a correctional environment. Sarah had chosen this job deliberately, seeking the kind of structured anonymity that government employment provided. She filled out timesheets, attended mandatory training sessions on food safety and inmate management, collected her biweekly paycheck, and blended into the institutional gray of civil service. The work was honest, necessary, and allowed her to serve others without the weight of command decisions or the constant pressure of life and death situations. The kitchen staff consisted of 12 civilian employees and 6 inmate workers who had earned the privilege through good behavior and clean disciplinary records. The civilian staff maintained a professional distance from their incarcerated colleagues, understanding that familiarity could compromise security and create opportunities for manipulation that experienced inmates would exploit without hesitation. Sarah's supervisor, Janet Morrison, was a 20-year veteran of corrections food service who ran the kitchen with the efficiency of a military quartermaster. She appreciated Sarah's quiet competence, her ability to handle the industrial equipment without constant supervision, and her remarkable skill at managing food preparation schedules that fed hundreds of people on a budget that would challenge a small restaurant. The inmate workers respected Sarah because she treated them with basic human dignity while maintaining clear boundaries about acceptable behavior and conversation. She never brought personal items to work that could be stolen or used as leverage, never shared information about her life outside the facility, and never allowed the casual friendship that some staff members developed with long-term inmates. Her daily routine began before dawn, with inventory checks and meal preparation for breakfast service. She worked efficiently through the morning rush, serving eggs and toast to inmates who shuffled through the serving line with institutional trays, and the carefully blank expressions of men who had learned to attract no attention from guards or fellow prisoners. Lunch preparation followed immediately, then dinner prep, then cleanup that extended well past the facility's evening lockdown procedures. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. During slow periods between meals, Sarah would sit in the break room, reading military history books or technical manuals about food service equipment maintenance. Her colleagues assumed she was studying for promotion opportunities or simply passing time, having no idea that she was maintaining mental disciplines learned during sniper training, keeping her mind sharp through constant learning and analysis. The respect she commanded from inmates came not from any display of authority, but from an underlying confidence that experienced criminals recognized instinctively. She moved through the kitchen and serving areas with the assured bearing of someone who had faced genuine danger and emerged intact, someone whose calm was earned rather than assumed. Guards appreciated her reliability and her complete lack of drama or complaint. She never called in sick, never requested schedule changes, never created problems that required administrative attention. In a facility where staffing shortages and high turnover created constant stress for management, Sarah represented the kind of steady professionalism that kept operations running smoothly. The warden, Thomas Bradley, knew her only as a line item in his budget reports and performance metrics. Her department consistently met food service standards, maintained sanitation requirements, and operated within allocated resources. From his perspective, the kitchen was one area of the facility that required minimal attention, thanks largely to staff members like Sarah, who simply did their jobs without creating complications. What none of them understood was that Sarah approached this work with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made her legendary among special operations units in Afghanistan. She analyzed sightlines and security vulnerabilities automatically, tracked patterns in guard rotations and inmate behavior, maintained situational awareness that most people reserved for combat zones. Her damaged hearing had ended her military career, but hadn't diminished her ability to read environmental cues and assess threats. The industrial kitchen had become her operational environment, and she knew every sight line, every potential position, every angle of fire from windows that looked out over the facility's exercise yards and administrative buildings. The irony was perfect in its completeness. A facility designed to contain dangerous men was protected by a woman whose capabilities they couldn't imagine, whose presence they barely acknowledged, and whose skills they would desperately need when their carefully controlled environment erupted into deadly chaos. Sarah had found peace in this structured anonymity, serving simple meals to complex men while carrying memories of a life that felt increasingly distant with each passing year. She had chosen civilian life over military career advancement, quiet service over recognition, stability over the adrenaline rush of combat operations that had once defined her identity. But some skills never fade completely, some training never leaves the muscle memory, and some people carry their mission in ways that can't be measured by rank or recognition. Sarah Chen had traded her rifle for a ladle, her ghillie suit for a hairnet, her desert boots for kitchen shoes, but she remained a guardian in ways that no one at Mountain Ridge Correctional Facility could possibly understand. The morning of October 15th began like any other, with Sarah arriving in darkness to begin breakfast preparation for 700 inmates and 53 staff members. The industrial ovens preheated with their familiar rumble, coffee brewed in 20-gallon urns, and the kitchen filled with the sounds and smells of institutional food service that had become as routine as breathing. She had no way of knowing that this ordinary Tuesday would demand every skill she had learned in 8 years of military service, that her deliberately quiet life was about to intersect with violence in ways that would test abilities she had hoped never to use again. The woman they called just a cook was about to remind everyone that some people carry extraordinary capabilities beneath the most ordinary appearances, and that true heroes often emerge from the places where no one thinks to look for them. The lunch rush at Mountain Ridge Correctional Facility brought its familiar chaos of clanging metal trays and shuffling feet, as 700 inmates moved through the serving line with the practiced efficiency that institutional life demanded. Sarah worked behind the steam tables with mechanical precision, ladling portions of beef stew and mashed potatoes while maintaining the professional distance that facility regulations required between civilian staff and the prison population. Her movements were economical and purposeful, each motion serving multiple functions as she managed food distribution, monitored portion control, and observed the complex social dynamics that played out in the brief interactions between inmates and kitchen staff. 3 years of this routine had taught her to read the subtle signs that preceded trouble, the tension in shoulders and changes in eye contact that warned of brewing conflicts before they erupted into violence. The inmates who passed through her line represented every category of criminal behavior that society had deemed worthy of long-term incarceration. Armed robbers served alongside white-collar embezzlers. Drug dealers shared meal times with violent assault perpetrators, and murderers ate at tables adjacent to individuals whose crimes were defined more by poor judgment than malicious intent. The democratic nature of institutional food service meant that everyone received equal treatment regardless of their offense or sentence length. Sarah's approach to this diverse population reflected principles she had learned during military service in regions where cultural sensitivity and basic human dignity could mean the difference between cooperation and armed resistance. She treated each inmate with respectful professionalism, neither friendly enough to compromise security nor hostile enough to create unnecessary tension in an environment where small provocations could escalate into major incidents. The facility's demographic composition included a significant percentage of veterans whose military service had ended badly, often due to post-traumatic stress disorders that civilian life had failed to address adequately. These men recognized something familiar in Sarah's bearing, an indefinable quality that spoke of shared experiences they couldn't articulate but instinctively understood and respected. Marcus Williams, serving consecutive life sentences for armed robbery that had resulted in civilian casualties, had been observing Sarah's interactions for months with the analytical skills that long-term inmates develop to survive in environments where reading people accurately was essential for personal safety. His assessment of her character had evolved from casual interest to grudging respect for someone who demonstrated genuine professionalism without condescension or fear. "She's different from the others," Williams had told his cellmate during one of their evening conversations about facility staff and their various approaches to managing the prison population. Most of them either act scared or try to prove how tough they are. "She just does her job like it matters, treats everyone the same way regardless of what they're in for or how long they've been here." The observation was more perceptive than Williams realized, reflecting Sarah's military training in dealing with local populations in hostile environments where demonstrating respect for human dignity could build trust that proved crucial during crisis situations. Her consistent fairness had earned recognition throughout the facility's complex social hierarchy, where respect was a currency more valuable than contraband or commissary privileges. During slower periods between meal services, Sarah often found herself serving as an unofficial counselor for inmates who struggled with institutional life, family problems, or the psychological challenges that came with long-term incarceration. Her ability to listen without judgment and offer practical advice had made her a trusted figure among men who had learned to distrust authority figures through years of negative interactions with law enforcement and corrections officials. The kitchen staff had noticed that disputes rarely occurred in Sarah's serving line, even among inmates who were known for confrontational behavior in other areas of the facility. Her presence seemed to create a zone of calm professionalism that influenced everyone's behavior, from aggressive inmates who moderated their language to nervous new arrivals who found reassurance in her steady competence. Janet Morrison, the kitchen supervisor, had come to rely on Sarah's judgment about inmate behavior and potential security concerns. Her assessments were invariably accurate, identifying individuals who might be planning disruptions or experiencing personal crises that could affect facility safety. The reliability of her observations had made her an unofficial liaison between kitchen operations and security personnel, who appreciated early warnings about developing problems. The respect Sarah commanded extended beyond individual interactions to influence the broader dynamics of institutional life in ways that corrections officials struggled to quantify but readily acknowledged. Violent incidents decreased in areas where she worked regularly. Disciplinary problems became less frequent among inmates who interacted with her daily, and the overall atmosphere in the kitchen reflected a professionalism that exceeded typical standards for correctional facility operations. Her influence on younger inmates was particularly notable, as many responded to her quiet authority in ways that reminded veteran corrections officers of the positive mentorship that could redirect criminal behavior toward more constructive choices. Sarah never preached or offered unsolicited advice, but her example of dignified work performed with genuine care created impressions that resonated with individuals who had rarely encountered such consistency in their interactions with authority figures. The facility's educational programs had begun requesting Sarah's informal participation in discussions about work ethic and professional responsibility, recognizing that her practical example carried more weight than theoretical presentations about post-release employment opportunities. Inmates who worked in the kitchen under her supervision consistently performed better in other facility programs, suggesting that her influence extended beyond food service into broader areas of institutional rehabilitation. Sarah's interactions with facility staff reflected the same principles of respectful professionalism that characterized her approach to inmate management. She avoided workplace gossip and drama, focused on job performance rather than personal relationships, and maintained boundaries that prevented the emotional complications that often undermined workplace effectiveness in high-stress environments like correctional facilities. The contrast between her steady competence and the behavioral problems that plagued other areas of the facility had not gone unnoticed by administrative personnel who dealt with constant staffing challenges and performance issues. Sarah represented the kind of employee that facility managers hoped to recruit but rarely found. Someone who brought genuine dedication to work that many people viewed as merely transitional employment between better opportunities. Her military background, though concealed in her personnel file, manifested in countless small ways that influenced facility operations in positive directions. The precision of her work schedules, the efficiency of her equipment maintenance, and the thoroughness of her safety procedures reflected training that exceeded civilian standards, while never drawing attention to capabilities that might raise uncomfortable questions about her previous experience. The kitchen's operational efficiency had improved significantly since Sarah's arrival, with food waste decreasing, equipment breakdowns becoming less frequent, and meal service running more smoothly, despite budget constraints that challenged every aspect of facility operations. Her contributions to these improvements were subtle but substantial, reflecting skills that extended far beyond basic food service into areas of logistics, resource management, and quality control. During emergency situations that periodically disrupted facility routines, Sarah's calm competence provided stability that prevented panic reactions among both staff and inmates. Her ability to maintain normal operations despite external pressures had made her invaluable during lockdowns, medical emergencies, and administrative crises that tested everyone's professionalism under difficult circumstances. The facility's annual performance reviews consistently rated Sarah among the highest-performing civilian employees, but her supervisor's attempts to nominate her for promotions or special recognition were politely declined. She seemed genuinely content with her current position and responsibilities, showing no interest in advancement opportunities that would have been attractive to most employees in similar circumstances. This contentment puzzled administrators who were accustomed to ambitious staff members seeking career advancement, but Sarah's satisfaction with meaningful work performed competently resonated with inmates and colleagues who recognized authentic dedication when they encountered it. Her example challenged assumptions about success and achievement in ways that inspired others to find purpose in their own responsibilities. The transformation of the facility's kitchen into a model of professional operation had attracted attention from state corrections officials who visited regularly to understand how such improvements had been achieved within existing budget constraints. The answer consistently pointed to personnel quality and leadership by example, factors that couldn't be replicated through policy changes or administrative directives alone. Sarah's influence on facility culture extended beyond operational improvements to include subtle changes in how staff and inmates interacted with each other on a daily basis. The respect she commanded and demonstrated created ripple effects that influenced behavior throughout areas where her presence was felt, suggesting that individual character could shape institutional environments in ways that formal programs and regulations often failed to achieve. The kitchen had become a place where people felt valued and respected regardless of their circumstances or backgrounds, a transformation that reflected Sarah's military training in building functional teams from diverse personnel with varying levels of skill and motivation. Her leadership style emphasized competence and mutual respect rather than hierarchy and authority, creating an environment where everyone could contribute meaningfully to collective success. As evening approached and dinner preparation began, Sarah moved through her responsibilities with the same steady professionalism that had characterized every day of her 3-year tenure at Mountain Ridge. She had no way of knowing that this routine was about to be shattered by events that would demand every skill she had learned during 8 years of military service in the world's most dangerous places, or that the quiet cook who had found peace in anonymous service was about to face challenges that would test the limits of her extraordinary capabilities. The morning shift at Mountain Ridge brought its usual collection of power struggles disguised as routine maintenance. Deputy Warden Marcus Kane strutted through the kitchen like he owned every stainless steel surface, his polished boots clicking against the concrete floors with deliberate authority. At 35, he had climbed the corrections hierarchy through political connections rather than field experience, carrying himself with the artificial confidence of someone who had never faced real danger. Kane had developed a particular disdain for civilian kitchen staff, viewing them as overpaid burden on his departmental budget. He made a point of inspecting their work with theatrical scrutiny, finding faults that didn't exist, and creating problems that served no purpose beyond establishing his dominance in the institutional pecking order. His treatment of Sarah bordered on harassment, delivered with the calculated cruelty of someone who enjoyed exercising power over people he perceived as defenseless. "Chen, this oatmeal looks like prison slop," Kane announced during morning inspection, loud enough for the entire kitchen staff to hear. His voice carried the condescending tone of someone addressing a particularly slow child. "Maybe if you actually cared about your job instead of just collecting a paycheck, our inmates might get something resembling real food instead of this garbage you're serving them." Sarah continued stirring the industrial-sized pot of oatmeal, her movements steady and methodical despite the public humiliation. She had learned long ago that responding to bullies only escalated their behavior, and Kane thrived on reactions that demonstrated his ability to provoke emotional responses from his subordinates. Her silence frustrated him more than any argument could have, but she maintained her professional composure regardless of his increasingly aggressive provocations. "Are you even listening to me when I'm talking to you?" Kane demanded, stepping closer to invade her personal space in a calculated display of intimidation. "I asked you a direct question about the quality of food you're serving in my facility, and I expect a response when your supervisor is addressing your performance." The other kitchen workers had stopped their tasks to watch the confrontation, recognizing the dangerous territory that Kane was entering with his escalating aggression. Janet Morrison, the kitchen supervisor, approached cautiously, understanding that intervening too aggressively might make the situation worse, while failing to protect her employee from administrative retaliation that could affect everyone's job security. Deputy Warden Kane, "The oatmeal meets all nutritional requirements specified in state guidelines." Sarah replied quietly, her voice carrying no trace of the anger that any reasonable person would feel when subjected to such public disrespect. "The temperature is maintained at regulation standards, and the portion sizes conform to approved serving measurements for adult male inmates." Kane's face flushed with frustration at her measured response, which denied him the emotional reaction he was seeking to justify further escalation. His need to establish dominance had become pathological, driving him to push boundaries that professional administrators would have recognized as counterproductive and potentially dangerous for facility morale. "Don't quote regulations to me like you're some kind of expert," Kane snapped, his voice rising to levels that inmates in nearby areas could undoubtedly hear through the kitchen's serving windows. "You're a cook, not a nutritionist, not a facility administrator, not anyone whose opinion matters in the operation of this correctional institution." The kitchen had fallen completely silent except for the mechanical hum of refrigeration units and ventilation systems. Even the inmate workers had stopped their assigned tasks, sensing the electric tension that filled the air when authority figures lost control of their emotions. Sarah's calm in the face of such aggressive provocation had become unsettling to observers who expected either submission or confrontation. Lieutenant Rodriguez, a 15-year corrections veteran with actual field experience, entered the kitchen during the confrontation and immediately recognized the problematic dynamics at play. Unlike Kane, Rodriguez had earned his position through demonstrated competence in managing difficult situations, and he understood that effective leadership required respect rather than fear as its foundation. Deputy Warden, we have a situation developing in Block C that requires your immediate attention. Rodriguez announced diplomatically, providing Kane with an opportunity to exit gracefully while ending his harassment of kitchen staff. The administrative team is requesting your oversight on the incident report procedures for the morning disciplinary hearing. Kane hesitated, clearly reluctant to abandon his power demonstration, but unable to ignore a direct request from another supervisor without appearing unprofessional. He shot Sarah a look filled with promise of future retaliation before turning to follow Rodriguez out of the kitchen, his departure bringing audible sighs of relief from the civilian staff who had witnessed his inappropriate behavior. "That man has serious control issues," muttered Dave Thompson, a kitchen worker who had transferred from another facility specifically to escape similar administrative problems. "I've seen deputy wardens like him before, and they always end up creating more problems than they solve with their need to prove how tough they are against people who can't fight back." Sarah resumed her work without comment, but Janet Morrison noticed the slight tension in her shoulders that suggested the confrontation had affected her more than her calm exterior indicated. Morrison had managed kitchen staff for 2 decades and had developed an instinct for recognizing when employees were struggling with stress that could affect their performance or job satisfaction. The harassment from Kane had been escalating for months, beginning with minor criticisms about food preparation and evolving into personal attacks that crossed professional boundaries. Sarah had never complained to human resources or requested intervention from higher-level administrators, handling the situation with a patience that Morrison found both admirable and concerning. What Morrison couldn't have known was that Sarah's calm came from extensive experience with hostile environments, where losing emotional control could result in mission failure, and the deaths of team members who depended on her professional discipline. Kane's bullying tactics were minor irritations compared to enemy sniper positions and improvised explosive devices, but they represented a different kind of challenge that required different responses. The morning breakfast service proceeded smoothly despite Kane's disruptive inspection, with inmates moving through the serving line in the organized patterns that institutional life imposed on every aspect of their daily routines. Sarah served portions with mechanical efficiency, making brief eye contact with each inmate while maintaining the professional distance that facility policies required for security reasons. Several long-term inmates had developed a grudging respect for Sarah's consistent fairness in portion sizes and her refusal to engage in the petty power games that some staff members used to assert dominance over the prison population. She never shortchanged portions based on personal dislike, never played favorites with inmates who attempted to curry favor, never used food service as a tool for punishment or reward. "She's different from the others," observed Marcus Williams, a lifer serving consecutive sentences for armed robbery who had been incarcerated for 14 years. "Most of the civilian staff either treat us like animals or try to be our friends because they're scared. She just treats us like people doing a job, no better or worse than anyone else." The respect Sarah commanded from inmates was particularly notable given the volatile nature of prison social dynamics, where any sign of weakness or favoritism could be exploited by individuals who had spent years learning to manipulate institutional systems for personal advantage. Her consistent professionalism had earned her a reputation for reliability that extended throughout the facility's complex social hierarchy. During the afternoon preparation period, Sarah worked with focused intensity that reflected her military training in efficiency and attention to detail. She prepared vegetables with knife work that would have impressed professional chefs, her cuts precise and uniform despite the industrial quantities required for institutional cooking. Her movements around the kitchen displayed an economy of motion that minimized wasted effort while maximizing productive output. The kitchen's layout provided clear sightlines through reinforced windows that overlooked the facility's central exercise yard, administrative building, and main security checkpoint. Sarah had memorized these views during her 3 years of employment, noting seasonal changes in vegetation, modifications to security equipment, and patterns in guard rotations that reflected the facility's operational rhythms. Her position at the main prep station offered an unobstructed view of the parking area where staff vehicles were secured behind secondary fencing, the visiting area where families met with inmates under careful supervision, and the loading dock, where supply trucks delivered everything from food ingredients to medical supplies under strict security protocols that required multiple authorization levels. These observations were automatic rather than deliberate, the result of training that had made environmental awareness as natural as breathing. Sarah didn't consciously analyze the tactical implications of window positions or calculate distances to potential targets, but her mind processed and filed such information with the precision that had once made her invaluable to special operations commanders who needed overwatch capabilities in hostile territory. The afternoon shift brought a different energy to the facility, as inmates returned from work details, educational programs, and recreational activities that filled the structured hours between meals. The kitchen staff prepared for dinner service while monitoring radio communications that kept them informed about facility-wide security status and any incidents that might affect meal scheduling or serving procedures. Sarah's hearing damage from her military service had left her with heightened sensitivity to certain frequencies, making her particularly attuned to the radio chatter that provided constant background information about institutional operations. She could distinguish between routine communications and the subtle changes in tone that indicated developing problems requiring administrative attention. The facility's population included individuals whose crimes ranged from white-collar fraud to violent assault, creating complex social dynamics that required constant monitoring by corrections professionals who understood how quickly situations could escalate from minor disagreements to life-threatening violence. Sarah had observed these patterns during her tenure, recognizing the signs that preceded major incidents. Her military experience had provided insights into group psychology under stress that proved remarkably applicable to prison environments, where individuals with limited options and significant grievances lived in close proximity under conditions designed to minimize their autonomy and personal agency. The parallels between combat zones and correctional facilities were more extensive than most people realized. As evening approached, Sarah completed her meal preparations with the methodical thoroughness that had characterized her approach to every assignment throughout her military career. She cleaned her workstations, secured equipment according to facility protocols, and prepared for the dinner service that would feed 700 inmates before the facility entered its overnight lockdown procedures. The institutional rhythms of prison life created a deceptive sense of predictability that could lull staff members into believing that their controlled environment was actually safe. Sarah understood better than most that violence could erupt without warning in places where desperate people lived under constant pressure, where minor provocations could escalate into deadly conflicts that overwhelmed security measures designed for routine operations rather than crisis management. Her damaged hearing had cost her the military career that had defined her identity for 8 years, but it hadn't diminished her ability to read situations and assess threats with the accuracy that had once kept special operations teams alive in hostile territory. The quiet cook in the institutional kitchen remained a warrior at heart, carrying skills that her civilian colleagues couldn't imagine, and capabilities that the correctional facility's security planners had never considered including in their emergency response protocols. The dinner preparation was proceeding normally when Sarah noticed the first anomaly at 4:47 p.m. Officer Jackson's radio had gone silent during his routine perimeter check, breaking a communication pattern that had remained consistent for the 18 months she had unconsciously monitored it. The silence lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds before resuming with a transmission that sounded subtly different in tone and cadence. Her damaged left ear, a liability in many situations, had developed hypersensitive frequency discrimination that allowed her to detect variations in vocal stress patterns that others would miss entirely. Jackson's voice carried undertones of forced casualness that suggested he was speaking under duress, delivering scripted responses while trying not to alert the control room to his compromised situation. Sarah continued preparing mashed potatoes for 700 inmates while her mind processed the implications of compromised perimeter security. Her military training had taught her to distinguish between equipment malfunctions and human-caused communication disruptions, and Jackson's irregular transmissions exhibited patterns consistent with hostage situations she had encountered during overseas deployments. The kitchen's radio scanner crackled with routine traffic about meal schedules and shift changes, but Sarah's trained ear detected subtle gaps in the normal flow of administrative communications. Guard stations were checking in with slightly delayed timing, suggesting coordination problems that could indicate a broader security compromise beyond Jackson's isolated position. 23 minutes later, the facility's main power grid experienced a brief fluctuation that lasted exactly 2.7 seconds. too short for emergency generators to activate, but long enough for someone with electrical systems knowledge to reset specific security protocols without triggering automatic lockdown procedures. The timing suggested deliberate manipulation rather than equipment failure, indicating sophisticated planning that extended beyond simple prison break attempts. Sarah's peripheral vision caught movement in the administrative parking area through the kitchen's reinforced windows. 3 vehicles had arrived within the past hour, positioned strategically near emergency exits with engines running and license plates oriented away from security cameras. The occupants remained inside their vehicles, maintaining positions that provided clear escape routes while offering overwatch of the facility's primary access points. Her combat experience recognized the tactical positioning immediately. These weren't random visitors or routine service personnel, but individuals with military or law enforcement training who understood surveillance countermeasures and extraction procedures. The coordination suggested a well-planned operation targeting specific objectives within the facility, not the opportunistic violence that characterized typical prison incidents. The radio chatter from the control room began exhibiting irregularities that confirmed Sarah's growing suspicions about a coordinated security breach. Supervisor voices carried subtle stress indicators that suggested they were managing a crisis while trying to maintain normal operational appearances, possibly under direct threat from individuals who understood correctional facility procedures well enough to exploit systemic vulnerabilities. At 5:14 p.m., Deputy Warden Kane's voice appeared on the radio requesting all kitchen staff to remain in their assigned areas until further notice, citing a routine security drill that required temporary movement restrictions throughout the facility. The explanation was plausible enough for civilian employees to accept without question, but Sarah recognized the terminology patterns used during active hostage situations to communicate with responding law enforcement agencies. The administrative building's windows, visible from her prep station, showed movement patterns that violated normal protocol for routine security exercises. Figures moved through hallways with the purposeful urgency of individuals operating under time constraints, not the measured pace of staff conducting planned drills. Emergency lighting systems flickered intermittently, suggesting systematic disruption of facility infrastructure by people who understood correctional security systems intimately. Sarah's situational awareness expanded to include inventory assessment of her immediate environment as potential tactical resources. The industrial kitchen contained numerous items that could be repurposed for defensive applications, from heavy cookware that could serve as improvised weapons to cleaning chemicals that could create diversions or barriers. Her military training automatically cataloged options while her civilian facade continued routine food preparation. The facility's inmate population remained unaware of developing security problems contained within their housing blocks according to normal evening schedules that preceded dinner service. Their isolation was deliberate, preventing panic reactions that could complicate crisis management while allowing security personnel to focus on containing threats without managing 700 potentially volatile individuals simultaneously. Sarah observed 3 more vehicles entering the administrative parking area, their occupants displaying coordination patterns that suggested extensive prior reconnaissance and detailed knowledge of facility layouts, guard rotations, and security procedures. The operation's sophistication indicated planning that extended over months rather than weeks, with participants who possessed insider knowledge of correctional operations. The radio traffic revealed another crucial detail when Control Room Supervisor Patricia Hayes transmitted a coded message requesting maintenance assistance in the administrative wing for hydraulic door malfunctions affecting secure access points. The terminology was specific enough to indicate that multiple security barriers had been compromised, creating access corridors that bypassed normal checkpoint procedures. At 5:31 p.m., Sarah heard the distinctive sound of automatic weapons fire from the direction of the administrative building, 3 controlled bursts that suggested precision shooting rather than panic spray patterns. The gunfire was immediately followed by radio silence from multiple guard stations, indicating that the facility's command structure was being systematically eliminated by individuals with tactical training and superior firepower. The kitchen's emergency protocols required all civilian staff to shelter in place during security incidents, but Sarah recognized that standard procedures were inadequate for the coordinated assault that was clearly underway. The attackers possessed detailed intelligence about facility operations and had planned their assault to neutralize key personnel while maintaining operational security that prevented outside intervention. Her military experience provided insights into the tactical situation that her civilian colleagues couldn't possess. The attackers were following a methodical elimination pattern designed to establish control over facility administration before proceeding to their primary objectives, whatever those might be. The systematic approach suggested professional training and specific mission parameters rather than random violence. The administrative building's main entrance exploded outward in a controlled demolition that scattered glass and debris across the parking area, creating an improvised exit route that bypassed normal security checkpoints. The explosion's timing and precision indicated military-grade explosives placed by individuals who understood structural engineering principles and had accessed the building's architectural plans during their preparation phase. Sarah's hands remained steady as she continued food preparation, but her mind was rapidly assessing tactical options for a situation that civilian authorities were clearly unprepared to handle. The attackers had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded typical law enforcement response protocols, suggesting that standard crisis management procedures would be ineffective against individuals with superior training and equipment. The facility's communication systems began experiencing systematic failures that isolated different sections from central command, preventing coordinated response efforts while allowing attackers to control information flow and maintain operational security. The pattern suggested cyber warfare capabilities combined with physical assault, indicating state-level training that exceeded typical domestic terrorist organizations. Through the kitchen windows, Sarah observed muzzle flashes from the administrative building as attackers eliminated remaining security personnel who had attempted to establish defensive positions. The gunfire patterns indicated multiple shooters with overlapping fields of fire, demonstrating tactical coordination that required extensive training and battlefield experience. At 5:47 p.m., the facility's main communication array was destroyed in another precisely timed explosion that severed all contact with outside law enforcement agencies while disabling internal communications between housing blocks and the compromised administration building. The facility was now completely isolated, with attackers maintaining total information control while proceeding with their planned objectives. Sarah recognized that whatever was happening extended beyond typical prison violence or even sophisticated escape attempts. The level of coordination, equipment, and tactical expertise suggested a military-style assault designed to achieve specific strategic objectives that required control over facility operations and personnel. The systematic elimination of security staff indicated that civilian casualties were acceptable losses in pursuit of their primary mission. The radio scanner in the kitchen received one final transmission before being cut off by the communication system failure. Deputy Warden Kane's voice, tight with fear and speaking in the controlled tone of someone with a weapon pointed at his head, announced that all facility personnel should remain in their assigned positions and await further instructions from temporary administrative oversight. Sarah understood immediately that she was witnessing a coordinated assault by individuals with military training who had infiltrated Mountain Ridge Correctional Facility to achieve objectives that required control over both personnel and infrastructure. The attackers possessed superior firepower, tactical coordination, and detailed intelligence about facility operations that had allowed them to neutralize official security responses with devastating efficiency. Her 3 years of anonymous service as a kitchen worker had just ended abruptly, replaced by a tactical situation that demanded every skill she had learned during 8 years of military service in hostile environments. The question was no longer whether she would need to use her sniper training, but whether her civilian colleagues and the facility's 700 inmates would survive what was clearly a professionally planned and executed military assault. The woman they dismissed as just a cook was about to face the most challenging shot of her entire military career, under conditions that would test every aspect of her training, while protecting people who had no idea that their survival depended on skills they didn't know she possessed. The kitchen's emergency lighting cast harsh shadows across stainless steel surfaces as Sarah moved with calculated precision toward the supply closet that housed maintenance equipment. Her civilian colleagues huddled near the walk-in refrigerators, following facility protocols that assumed help would arrive from outside agencies, who were now cut off from all communication with the compromised facility. Janet Morrison whispered urgent questions about evacuation procedures, while Dave Thompson tried unsuccessfully to reach his family on a cell phone that displayed no signal bars. The attackers had deployed sophisticated jamming equipment that isolated the facility from external communications while maintaining their own tactical coordination through encrypted radio systems that civilian law enforcement couldn't intercept or disrupt. Sarah's military training recognized the signature patterns of a black operations assault designed to achieve specific objectives under conditions of total information control. The systematic elimination of security personnel, the precise timing of infrastructure attacks, and the sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities indicated resources that exceeded typical domestic terrorist organizations by several orders of magnitude. Behind the industrial dishwashing station, she retrieved a maintenance access panel that concealed the facility's original construction blueprints, architectural drawings that detailed structural elements including ventilation systems, electrical conduits, and most importantly, for her immediate purposes, sightlines between buildings that weren't visible from ground-level positions. The blueprints revealed what her visual reconnaissance had suggested. The kitchen's elevated position on the facility's second level provided direct line of sight to the administrative building's conference room, where thermal imaging through the windows showed approximately 15 figures gathered in what appeared to be a coordination meeting. The distance measured exactly 287 yards, well within her effective range under ideal conditions. However, these conditions were far from ideal. The kitchen's reinforced windows were designed to prevent contraband transfer and escape attempts, constructed with laminated security glass that would deflect standard ammunition while distorting precision shots that required absolute accuracy. The window frames were steel reinforced and sealed permanently, preventing normal opening mechanisms that might provide clear shooting positions. Sarah's damaged hearing detected subtle changes in the facility's acoustic environment that indicated the attackers were moving beyond their initial control phase toward executing their primary mission objectives. Mechanical sounds from the administrative building suggested heavy equipment being moved into position, possibly explosive devices or weapon systems that required setup time before deployment. The thermal imaging visible through the conference room windows showed the attackers had gathered 47 individuals in a centralized location, including facility staff, visiting family members who had been trapped during the assault, and administrative personnel who possessed access codes and security information. The grouping was deliberate, designed to maximize psychological pressure while providing efficient control over high-value targets. Sarah recognized the tactical situation immediately. The attackers were preparing for mass execution of witnesses and key personnel once they had extracted whatever information or resources they required from the facility. The timeline suggested they were operating under strict scheduling constraints, possibly coordinated with external extraction or support elements that required precise timing for successful completion. Her military experience provided crucial insights into the psychological profile of the assault team. Their systematic approach and disciplined execution indicated professional soldiers or former special operations personnel rather than ideologically motivated terrorists. They were following mission parameters designed to achieve specific strategic objectives, not conducting random violence for psychological impact. The conference room's layout, visible through thermal imaging, showed the hostages positioned against the far wall, while armed figures maintained overwatch positions that provided clear fields of fire. The arrangement was tactically sound for crowd control, but created a vulnerability that Sarah's sniper training had taught her to exploit. The attackers were concentrated in predictable positions that offered limited movement options. At 6:23 p.m., the kitchen's emergency lighting flickered and stabilized on backup power as the attackers completed their systematic shutdown of facility infrastructure. The power transition provided Sarah with crucial information about their operational timeline. They were moving toward the execution phase of their mission, which meant her window of opportunity was rapidly closing. She moved to the maintenance storage area and retrieved a high-pressure water hose used for industrial cleaning, along with a precision screwdriver set that maintenance crews used for equipment repairs. Her plan required creating a shooting position through the reinforced window while minimizing structural damage that might compromise her single opportunity for an effective shot. The facility's architect had positioned the kitchen windows to prevent direct sight lines into sensitive areas, but the assault team's positioning in the conference room created an angle of approach that bypassed most of the visual obstructions. Sarah calculated windage factors based on the facility's mountain location and current weather conditions visible through her makeshift observation position. Her military training had emphasized that successful sniper operations required absolute commitment to the first shot, since revealing position typically eliminated any possibility for follow-up attempts. The conference room's distance and the challenging shooting conditions meant she would have exactly one opportunity to disrupt the execution scenario before the attackers adapted to the unexpected threat. The thermal imaging showed increased activity among the assault team as they began final preparations for what appeared to be systematic elimination of their hostages. Time compression was working against Sarah's methodical approach to precision shooting, forcing her to accelerate procedures that normally required extended preparation and environmental assessment. Using the precision screwdriver, she began carefully removing the window's interior frame elements, creating a minimal opening that would accommodate her improvised shooting position while maintaining structural integrity of the security glass. The work required delicate manipulation to avoid sudden stress fractures that would compromise the entire window assembly. Her damaged hearing picked up engine sounds from the parking area as additional vehicles arrived to support the assault team's extraction procedures. The coordination suggested a sophisticated logistical operation, with backup plans and contingency resources that exceeded simple criminal activity. These were professionals executing a carefully planned military operation against a civilian target. Sarah's hands moved with the steady precision that had once made her legendary among special operations units in Afghanistan. Years of civilian life hadn't diminished her ability to work under extreme pressure while maintaining the focus necessary for precision shooting under combat conditions. The muscle memory remained intact, waiting beneath the surface of her civilian identity. The conference room's thermal signature showed the assault team leader moving toward the hostage group, his body language suggesting that the execution phase was imminent. Sarah's military experience recognized the behavioral patterns that preceded mass killings, the systematic preparation that professional soldiers use to maximize efficiency while minimizing emotional stress during necessary but unpleasant operations. She retrieved a telescoping maintenance rod from the utility closet, a tool designed for reaching high equipment that could be modified to provide the stable shooting rest necessary for precision work at extended distances. Her improvised shooting position would be far from ideal, but her Afghanistan experience had taught her to adapt standard techniques to challenging field conditions. The facility's mountain location created wind conditions that changed rapidly as evening temperatures dropped and thermal currents shifted around the building's concrete structure. Sarah's training had emphasized the importance of reading environmental factors that affected bullet trajectory, skills that remained sharp despite 3 years away from active shooting positions. At 6:41 p.m., the thermal imaging showed the assault team leader raising what appeared to be an automatic weapon toward the hostage group, his body position indicating that mass execution was beginning immediately. Sarah's window of opportunity had compressed to seconds rather than minutes, eliminating any possibility for extended preparation or ideal shooting conditions. Her military training took over completely as civilian Sarah Chen disappeared, replaced by Ghost 7, the Marine sniper who had never missed a shot when lives depended on absolute precision. The transformation was instantaneous and complete, muscle memory overriding conscious thought, as years of combat experience condensed into the focused intensity that made the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The improvised shooting position felt familiar despite the unconventional equipment and challenging conditions. Sarah's body settled into shooting posture automatically, her breathing pattern adjusting to the rhythm that had once made her invaluable to special operations teams, who needed overwatch capabilities in hostile territory, where hesitation meant death for everyone involved. The conference room's distance required calculations that she performed instinctively, windage and elevation adjustments that compensated for the mountain facility's environmental factors, and the challenging shooting angle through reinforced glass that would affect bullet trajectory in ways that demanded precise compensation. Through her improvised sight picture, Sarah could see 47 innocent people who had seconds to live unless she made an impossible shot through conditions that would challenge even elite military snipers under ideal circumstances. The woman they had dismissed as just a cook was about to remind everyone that some skills never fade, and that heroes emerge from the most unexpected places when everything depends on their willingness to act. Her finger found the makeshift trigger mechanism she had created from kitchen equipment. Her breathing steadied into the pattern that had once made her legendary among Marines, and Ghost 7 prepared to make the shot that would define her legacy far beyond any recognition the military had ever provided. Sarah's world narrowed to the precise calculations that separated life from death across 287 yards of Colorado mountain air. Her improvised rifle, constructed from kitchen equipment and maintenance tools with the ingenuity born of desperate necessity, felt alien in her hands compared to the precision instruments she had wielded in Afghanistan. Yet her finger found the familiar rhythm of controlled breathing that had once made her legendary among Marines who understood that some shots carried the weight of entire missions. The conference room's thermal signature revealed the assault team leader's weapon rising toward 47 innocent people whose only crime was being in the wrong place when professional killers executed their carefully planned operation. Sarah's damaged left ear, liability in so many situations, now provided hypersensitive frequency discrimination that allowed her to detect the mechanical sounds of automatic weapons being prepared for sustained fire against defenseless targets. Through her improvised sight picture, she could see the leader's finger moving toward his trigger mechanism, his body language displaying the cold efficiency of someone who had performed mass executions before and felt no emotional resistance to killing civilians who posed no tactical threat to his mission objectives. The hostages pressed against the conference room's far wall, their terror visible even through thermal imaging as they realized that their captors intended no negotiation or mercy. Sarah's breathing pattern settled into the meditative rhythm that had once allowed her to remain motionless for hours in Afghan mountainsides, waiting for the perfect moment when wind conditions, target movement, and tactical necessity aligned to create the impossible shot that mission success required. Her pulse slowed to the steady cadence that separated professional snipers from amateur marksmen, each heartbeat calibrated to the space between breaths where perfect stillness allowed absolute precision. The mathematical calculations flowed through her mind with the automatic precision that 8 years of military training had embedded in her muscle memory. Windage compensation for mountain thermal currents, elevation adjustment for the challenging upward angle, trajectory modification for the improvised ammunition she had constructed from materials never intended for precision shooting at extended distances under combat conditions that would challenge Olympic marksmen. Her finger caressed the makeshift trigger mechanism with the gentle pressure that distinguished masters from students in the unforgiving discipline of precision shooting. Too much pressure would disturb the delicate alignment necessary for accuracy at this distance, while insufficient commitment would result in jerky trigger control that sent bullets wide of their intended targets, when millimeter precision determined whether innocent people lived or died. The assault team leader's weapon reached firing position as Sarah's crosshairs settled on the center mass target that offered the highest probability of mission success under these impossible conditions. Her military training had emphasized the brutal mathematics of combat shooting. Center mass shots provided maximum stopping power and highest hit probability, while dramatic headshots existed primarily in Hollywood fantasies that bore no resemblance to professional marksmanship. Time dilated into the strange suspension that combat veterans recognized as the moment when training overcame conscious thought and muscle memory executed actions too complex for deliberate control. Sarah's world contained only the sight picture, the target, and the perfect stillness between heartbeats, where Ghost 7 emerged from 3 years of civilian anonymity to remind everyone why Marines had once considered her irreplaceable. The shot broke with the crisp precision that separated professional marksmanship from amateur enthusiasm, her improvised rifle recoiling against her shoulder as the bullet began its trajectory across mountain air that would either save 47 lives or condemn them to execution by professional killers who understood no mercy in their systematic approach to eliminating witnesses. Through the conference room's windows, the assault team leader jerked backward as the bullet struck him with devastating precision, his automatic weapon discharging harmlessly into the ceiling as his nervous system processed the massive trauma that transformed him from predator to casualty in the microseconds that defined the difference between life and death in combat situations. The thermal imaging showed immediate chaos among the remaining assault team members as they struggled to understand how their carefully planned operation had been compromised by sniper fire from an impossible angle that their tactical reconnaissance had never identified as a threat vector. Their confusion provided crucial seconds for the hostages to recognize that rescue was underway and seek whatever cover the conference room's limited furniture could provide. Sarah was already moving before her first shot's impact could be confirmed, her military training emphasizing that revealing position eliminated any advantage that surprise might provide against professionally trained opponents who would adapt quickly to unexpected threats. The kitchen's layout offered multiple positions that could provide follow-up shots if the assault team regrouped effectively. The facility's radio scanner crackled to life with encrypted communications as the surviving assault team members attempted to coordinate their response to the unexpected sniper threat. Sarah's damaged hearing allowed her to distinguish stress patterns in their transmissions that indicated professional discipline beginning to fracture under the pressure of mission parameters that no longer matched their carefully planned scenario. Through her secondary observation position, she watched the assault team leader's subordinates attempt tactical movement toward positions that offered better protection from the kitchen's elevated shooting angle. Their movements displayed military training but lacked the cohesion that characterized elite special operations units, suggesting that their leader had been the primary tactical coordinator whose elimination had disrupted their command structure. The hostages in the conference room began moving toward emergency exits as the assault team's attention focused on identifying and neutralizing the sniper threat that had transformed their controlled execution scenario into a complex tactical situation, requiring resources and coordination they hadn't anticipated needing during what should have been a straightforward elimination operation. Sarah's second shot targeted the assault team member who was attempting to establish overwatch of the kitchen building, his body language indicating that he possessed the tactical knowledge necessary to coordinate an effective response to her intervention. The bullet struck him as he raised his rifle toward her position, eliminating another crucial element of their command structure, while creating additional confusion among the remaining attackers. The systematic elimination of their leadership created a cascade effect that Sarah's military experience had taught her to recognize and exploit. Professional assault teams relied on clear command structures and predetermined tactical responses, but removing key decision-makers left subordinates struggling to adapt to rapidly changing conditions without the coordination necessary for effective counter-sniper operations. Her third shot eliminated the communications specialist who was attempting to coordinate with external support elements, severing their connection to whatever extraction or reinforcement capabilities they had positioned outside the facility. The isolation forced the remaining assault team members to operate independently, without the logistical support that complex operations required for successful completion. The conference room's hostages had reached the emergency exits and were evacuating through corridors that led away from the compromised administrative building, their escape coordinated by facility staff who understood evacuation procedures better than their captors had anticipated. The assault team's tactical planning had focused on controlling key personnel rather than preventing mass evacuation under combat conditions. Sarah's fourth and fifth shots targeted assault team members who were attempting to pursue the escaping hostages, her precision marksmanship eliminating threats before they could reach positions that offered clear fields of fire against defenseless civilians. Each shot demonstrated the accuracy that had once made her invaluable to special operations commanders, who needed absolute reliability under impossible conditions. The remaining assault team members had taken defensive positions within the administrative building, but their tactical situation had deteriorated beyond recovery. Their mission parameters required speed and stealth, not prolonged engagement with a sniper whose position and capabilities they couldn't determine through their compromised reconnaissance methods. Through thermal imaging, Sarah observed the systematic withdrawal of surviving assault team members toward their extraction vehicles in the parking area. The evacuation was conducted with professional discipline, but their mission had clearly failed once the systematic execution of witnesses became impossible due to her intervention at the crucial moment when their timeline demanded immediate completion. The facility's backup generators restored partial lighting to administrative areas, as the assault team's electronic warfare equipment was abandoned during their tactical withdrawal. Communication systems began functioning intermittently, allowing facility staff to coordinate with law enforcement agencies who had been responding to the crisis without reliable information about conditions inside the compromised perimeter. At 7:34 p.m., the last assault team vehicle departed the facility's parking area under covering fire from automatic weapons that kept responding law enforcement units at safe distances, while the professionals who had planned and executed the sophisticated attack made their escape through mountain roads that offered multiple route options for avoiding pursuit by local authorities. Sarah remained in her shooting position until facility security confirmed that all external threats had been eliminated and the immediate danger to civilian personnel had passed. Her transition back to civilian identity was gradual, Ghost 7's combat mindset slowly giving way to the quiet kitchen worker who had spent 3 years serving meals to inmates and staff without revealing capabilities that extended far beyond food preparation. The aftermath brought investigators from multiple federal agencies who struggled to understand how a coordinated military assault on a maximum security correctional facility had been defeated by a single individual with improvised equipment and impossible shooting conditions. The ballistics analysis confirmed that all 5 shots had been fired from the kitchen's position at distances and angles that challenged professional marksmen under ideal circumstances. Deputy Warden Kane, rescued along with 46 other hostages from certain execution, approached Sarah with the humility that comes from recognizing how completely wrong his assumptions had been about someone he had dismissed and harassed for months. His apology carried the weight of genuine remorse from someone who understood that his arrogance had blinded him to the extraordinary capabilities of the woman who had saved his life. The facility's investigation revealed that Sarah's personnel file contained classified designations that civilian administrators weren't authorized to access, information that would have explained her unusual qualifications and remarkable composure under extreme pressure. The background check had been accurate but incomplete, revealing only what she had chosen to share about her previous experience. Colonel Patricia Hayes arrived from military headquarters with official recognition that had been impossible to present 3 years earlier, when Sarah was presumed dead with the rest of Phoenix 7. The Medal of Valor that had been awarded posthumously now belonged to a living hero, whose actions at Mountain Ridge Correctional Facility had demonstrated that some skills never fade and some people carry their mission wherever they go. Sarah's response to the recognition was characteristic of her approach to service throughout her military and civilian careers. The medal belonged not to her individual achievement, but to the 47 people whose lives had been saved through the collective actions of everyone who had maintained their courage and professionalism during the crisis that tested everyone's character under impossible circumstances. The kitchen at Mountain Ridge reopened 3 days later, with Sarah returning to her regular duties as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The difference was that now every person who walked through the facility understood that heroism comes in forms that can't be measured by rank or recognition, and that the most important victories are often won by people who seek no reward beyond the knowledge that others are safe. The story of the impossible shots that saved 47 lives became legend throughout the corrections community and military circles. But Sarah preferred the quiet satisfaction that came from serving others without fanfare. She had found her true calling in the simple acts of daily service that made the world a little better for everyone around her, proving that the greatest heroes are often those who choose to guard others without seeking to be guarded themselves. The investigation into the Mountain Ridge assault revealed layers of complexity that challenged every assumption federal authorities had made about domestic security threats. The attackers had possessed detailed architectural plans, staff schedules, and security protocols that suggested months of professional reconnaissance combined with insider knowledge that civilian law enforcement agencies struggled to trace through normal investigative channels. Sarah found herself at the center of a media storm that transformed her from anonymous kitchen worker into a national symbol of quiet heroism, but her response to the attention reflected the same principles that had guided her transition from military to civilian life. She declined interview requests, avoided public appearances, and continued reporting for her regular kitchen duties as if nothing extraordinary had happened during those crucial minutes when her actions prevented mass execution. The facility's reopening brought unprecedented security measures that included federal oversight, enhanced communication systems, and tactical response capabilities designed to prevent similar attacks in the future. Sarah observed these improvements with professional interest, while maintaining her commitment to the simple work of feeding people who depended on institutional services regardless of the circumstances that had brought them to Mountain Ridge. Her colleagues in the kitchen treated her with a mixture of awe and confusion, struggling to reconcile the quiet woman they had worked alongside for 3 years with the legendary markswoman whose impossible shots had saved 47 lives under conditions that challenged elite military snipers. The disconnect between her modest demeanor and extraordinary capabilities created a cognitive dissonance that few people could resolve satisfactorily. Janet Morrison, the kitchen supervisor, found herself managing a staff member who had become a celebrity, while insisting on maintaining the same work schedule, performing the same duties, and accepting the same wages that had characterized her employment before the incident. Sarah's determination to remain unchanged by recognition that would have transformed most people's lives completely puzzled administrators who expected her to leverage her heroism into better opportunities. The inmates at Mountain Ridge processed Sarah's revelation through the complex social dynamics that governed prison life, where respect was earned through actions rather than reputation, and where authentic toughness was distinguished from artificial posturing through careful observation over extended periods. Her consistent treatment of them before and after the incident validated their previous assessments of her character, while adding new dimensions to their understanding of what genuine strength looked like. Marcus Williams, The lifer who had recognized Sarah's unusual qualities long before the shooting became an unofficial spokesman for the inmate population's perspective on the woman who had risked her life to protect facility staff and visiting family members. His analysis of her motivations carried weight among men who had spent years learning to distinguish between genuine courage and self-serving heroics. She didn't do it for recognition or reward, Williams explained to younger inmates who struggled to understand why someone would voluntarily risk their life for people they barely knew. She did it because that's who she is. Some people talk about doing the right thing when it's convenient, but she actually does it when everything's on the line and nobody's watching to give her credit for it. The federal investigation had uncovered evidence that the assault team was composed of former military personnel who had been recruited by an organization with sophisticated resources and political motivations that extended beyond simple criminal activity. Their target had been specific information stored in the facility's administrative computers, classified data about witness protection programs, and federal informant identities that could have compromised ongoing investigations across multiple jurisdictions. Sarah's intervention had prevented not only mass murder but also an intelligence breach that would have endangered hundreds of people whose cooperation with law enforcement had helped dismantle criminal organizations and terrorist networks. The strategic implications of her actions extended far beyond the immediate lives saved at Mountain Ridge, creating ripple effects that protected communities and investigations she would never know about. The military recognition ceremony held at the facility 3 weeks after the incident brought together officials from every branch of service to honor a Marine whose actions had demonstrated the highest traditions of military service while serving as a civilian employee in circumstances that no training manual had ever anticipated. Sarah accepted the Medal of Valor with the same quiet dignity that characterized all her interactions, focusing attention on the collective response that had made survival possible for everyone involved. Her brief speech at the ceremony avoided personal heroics in favor of acknowledging the facility staff, law enforcement responders, and inmates who had maintained their composure during a crisis that tested everyone's character under extraordinary pressure. The emphasis on collective action rather than individual achievement reflected leadership principles that military audiences recognized as genuine rather than performative humility. The aftermath of the ceremony brought renewed pressure for Sarah to return to active military service, with offers from Special Operations Commands that recognized her unique combination of technical skills and practical experience in civilian environments. Elite units valued operators who could blend into normal society while maintaining the capabilities necessary for precision work under impossible conditions. Sarah's response to these offers reflected the same decision-making process that had guided her transition to civilian life 3 years earlier. She had found meaningful work that allowed her to serve others without the weight of command responsibilities or the psychological burden of missions that required taking lives to protect abstract strategic objectives. The kitchen at Mountain Ridge provided personal satisfaction that military recognition couldn't match. The facility's transformation in the weeks following the incident created an environment where Sarah's influence could extend beyond immediate crisis management into long-term improvements in how institutions approach security, staff development, and inmate relations. Her example had demonstrated that exceptional capabilities could emerge from unexpected sources when circumstances demanded extraordinary responses from ordinary people. Young corrections officers began requesting assignments to the kitchen specifically to observe Sarah's approach to managing challenging personalities and potentially volatile situations. Her methods defied conventional training in de-escalation techniques, relying instead on consistent respect and professional competence that earned genuine cooperation rather than grudging compliance from people who had learned to distrust authority figures. The educational programs at Mountain Ridge incorporated Sarah's story into curricula about conflict resolution, leadership under pressure, and the importance of maintaining professional standards regardless of external circumstances. Inmates studying for high school equivalency diplomas wrote essays about heroism and civic responsibility that reflected their direct experience with someone whose actions had demonstrated those principles in practice rather than theory. The facility's mental health services reported significant improvements in inmate morale and staff confidence following the incident, suggesting that witnessing genuine courage under extreme circumstances had therapeutic value that traditional counseling approaches struggled to achieve. The collective experience of surviving a crisis through individual and group competence created bonds that transcended the usual divisions between staff and inmates. Sarah's daily routine gradually returned to its previous patterns, But her presence in the facility carried new meaning for everyone who understood what had happened during those crucial minutes when professional killers had been defeated by improvised marksmanship and absolute commitment to protecting others. The kitchen became a pilgrimage site for visitors who wanted to understand how ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when circumstances demanded their best efforts. The State Corrections Department used Mountain Ridge as a model facility for training programs that emphasized the importance of hiring staff with strong character, rather than focusing exclusively on technical qualifications or administrative experience. Sarah's example had demonstrated that exceptional employees often carried capabilities that standard screening processes couldn't identify or measure through conventional criteria. Federal law enforcement agencies began recruiting programs specifically designed to identify veterans who had transitioned to civilian careers but retained skills valuable for specialized operations requiring precision marksmanship, tactical thinking, and psychological resilience under extreme pressure. Sarah's case had revealed untapped resources within communities that traditional recruitment methods had overlooked. The annual memorial service for correctional officers killed in the line of duty included Sarah among the speakers, though her remarks focused on the 47 people whose survival had been made possible by collective courage and professional competence, rather than individual heroics. Her perspective on service and sacrifice resonated with audiences who recognized authentic dedication when they encountered it. The legacy of the Mountain Ridge incident extended into military training programs that used Sarah's actions as case studies in improvised marksmanship, resource utilization under combat conditions, and the importance of maintaining skills readiness even during civilian assignments. Her example challenged assumptions about retirement from active service and the continuing obligations that came with specialized training. Years later, Sarah continued working at Mountain Ridge Correctional Facility with the same quiet competence that had characterized her service before the incident, but her presence carried meaning that extended far beyond food service into areas of inspiration, leadership, and the demonstration that heroism emerges from character rather than circumstance. She had become a living reminder that some people carry their mission wherever they go, serving others through actions rather than recognition. The woman they had called just a cook had revealed capabilities that challenged every assumption about hidden potential within ordinary communities, proving that the most important victories are often won by people who seek no reward beyond the knowledge that they made the world safer for everyone around them. Her story became a testament to the truth that genuine heroes often emerge from the places where no one thinks to look for them, serving quietly until the moment when everything depends on their willingness to act. The kitchen at Mountain Ridge remained her chosen battlefield, where she fought daily battles against indifference, despair, and institutional dehumanization through the simple act of treating every person with dignity and respect. The impossible shots that saved 47 lives had been extraordinary, but her continued service in an ordinary job demonstrated the kind of heroism that sustained communities and inspired others to find meaning in their own opportunities to make a difference through consistent excellence and genuine care for others. 5 years after the Mountain Ridge incident, Sarah's story had become woven into the fabric of American military culture as an example of how service continues long after uniforms are hung up and ceremonies concluded. Military academies incorporated her case study into curricula about transition planning, emphasizing that skills learned in combat could find meaningful application in civilian roles that seemed completely unrelated to military objectives but served equally important missions in protecting and strengthening communities. The Sarah Chen Leadership Institute, established at the Marine Corps Base in Colorado Springs, focused on preparing service members for civilian careers that utilized their specialized training while serving broader social purposes. The program attracted veterans from all branches who sought alternatives to traditional security contracting or law enforcement careers, recognizing that military capabilities could address community needs in ways that conventional approaches often missed. Young Marines completing sniper training now received additional instruction in civilian applications of their precision shooting skills, from wildlife management and conservation work to search and rescue operations where accurate marksmanship could mean the difference between successful missions and tragic failures. Sarah's example had demonstrated that technical expertise could serve humanitarian purposes that extended far beyond military objectives. The correctional facility transformation at Mountain Ridge had inspired similar programs throughout the federal prison system, where administrators recognized that hiring veterans with specialized training could address security vulnerabilities while providing meaningful employment opportunities for service members struggling with civilian transition. The model emphasized character assessment over traditional qualifications, leading to improved outcomes for both institutions and employees. Sarah's approach to inmate relations had been studied by criminology researchers who found that respect-based interactions produced measurably better rehabilitation outcomes than traditional authoritarian approaches. Her methods challenged fundamental assumptions about corrections philosophy, suggesting that treating incarcerated individuals with dignity could reduce recidivism rates while improving facility safety for everyone involved. The quarterly reports from Mountain Ridge showed sustained improvements in every measurable category of institutional performance, from violent incidents and disciplinary actions to educational program participation and successful re-entry rates. The facility had become a model for evidence-based corrections practices that emphasized human dignity alongside security requirements, attracting visitors from around the world who wanted to understand how such transformation had been achieved. Deputy Warden Kane, whose life had been saved by Sarah's intervention, had undergone his own transformation in the years following the incident. His previous arrogance and bullying behavior had been replaced by thoughtful leadership that emphasized staff development and professional growth rather than dominance through intimidation. The experience of owing his life to someone he had mistreated had provided lessons in humility that shaped every aspect of his subsequent career. Kane's annual performance reviews now consistently praised his collaborative approach to facility management and his ability to identify potential among staff members that other administrators might overlook. He had become an advocate for veteran hiring initiatives and professional development programs that recognize diverse forms of excellence rather than conformity to narrow administrative expectations. The federal investigation into the Mountain Ridge assault had ultimately revealed a conspiracy involving former military personnel who had been recruited by foreign intelligence services seeking to compromise American witness protection programs. Sarah's intervention had prevented not only immediate casualties but also a strategic intelligence breach that could have undermined national security operations for years to come. The congressional testimony about the incident had led to enhanced security protocols for correctional facilities, housing federal witnesses and informants, while also highlighting the value of employing veterans whose training enabled them to recognize and respond to threats that civilian security measures might miss. Sarah's case had become a template for proactive defense strategies that utilized human resources more effectively than technological solutions alone. The Medal of Valor presentation had been followed by numerous other recognitions, but Sarah continued declining public appearances and interview requests, preferring to let her ongoing work speak for itself rather than trading on past heroics for personal advancement. Her consistency in avoiding celebrity status had enhanced rather than diminished her reputation among military and civilian communities that valued substance over publicity. The kitchen staff at Mountain Ridge had developed into one of the most effective teams in the federal correction system, with turnover rates well below national averages and performance metrics that exceeded expectations across all operational categories. Sarah's influence on workplace culture had created an environment where people took pride in their contributions to institutional mission success rather than simply collecting paychecks while awaiting better opportunities. Janet Morrison, the kitchen supervisor, had been promoted to food service director for the entire regional correction system, largely based on the operational excellence achieved at Mountain Ridge under her management. Her success had been built on recognizing and utilizing the exceptional capabilities that Sarah brought to seemingly routine food service operations, demonstrating how effective leadership could multiply individual excellence into collective achievement. The inmate population at Mountain Ridge continued to include a significant percentage of veterans, whose respect for Sarah transcended the usual divisions between civilian staff and incarcerated individuals. Their informal mentorship relationships had contributed to reduced disciplinary incidents and improved participation in rehabilitation programs, suggesting that authentic leadership could bridge differences that formal authority structures struggled to address. Marcus Williams had become a certified peer counselor within the facility, using his long-term incarceration experience and relationship with Sarah to help younger inmates understand how respect and professionalism could improve their circumstances even within the constraints of prison life. His transformation from career criminal to positive influence reflected the ripple effects that genuine leadership could create in environments where hope was often in short supply. The educational programs at Mountain Ridge reported that Sarah's story had become one of the most requested topics for inmate writing assignments and discussion groups, with participants analyzing themes of second chances, hidden potential, and the importance of maintaining dignity regardless of circumstances. The discussions often focused on how individuals could contribute positively to their communities, even when facing significant personal challenges. The facility's mental health services had documented significant improvements in both staff and inmate psychological well-being, attributing much of the progress to the enhanced sense of safety and mutual respect that had developed following the incident. The knowledge that exceptional capabilities existed within their community had created confidence that extended beyond security considerations into general morale and institutional pride. The annual training conferences for corrections professionals now regularly featured presentations about the Mountain Ridge model, emphasizing the importance of recognizing diverse forms of excellence among staff members and creating environments where exceptional capabilities could emerge when needed. Sarah's example had challenged traditional hiring practices and performance evaluation methods throughout the corrections industry. The veteran transition programs operated by the Department of Veterans Affairs began incorporating Sarah's story into counseling sessions about finding meaningful civilian careers that utilized military training while serving important social purposes. Her path from elite military service to institutional food service had demonstrated that significance came from impact rather than prestige or compensation levels. The research conducted by military sociologists had identified Sarah's case as evidence that veterans could continue serving their country in civilian roles that might appear mundane but actually addressed critical community needs requiring specialized skills and professional dedication. The findings had influenced policy recommendations about veteran employment and community integration strategies. The ripple effects of Sarah's actions extended into military recruitment materials that emphasized the lifelong nature of service commitments and the diverse ways that training could benefit society long after active duty ended. Her story challenged stereotypes about veteran capabilities while demonstrating that military skills could address civilian challenges in unexpected but highly effective ways. The federal prison reform initiatives that followed the Mountain Ridge incident had incorporated Sarah's approach to staff-inmate relations into policy recommendations that emphasized respect-based interactions as more effective than traditional authoritarian methods for achieving rehabilitation objectives. Her example had provided practical evidence that theoretical criminology concepts could work in real-world institutional settings. The international visitors who studied the Mountain Ridge transformation often commented on the facility's unique atmosphere of mutual respect and professional competence, noting that similar approaches might address correctional challenges in their own countries. Sarah's influence had transcended national boundaries to inspire discussions about human dignity and institutional excellence on a global scale. As Sarah continued her daily routine of preparing meals for hundreds of people who depended on institutional services, her presence carried meaning that extended far beyond food service into areas of inspiration, community building, and the demonstration that extraordinary capabilities could emerge from the most ordinary circumstances when guided by principles of service and professional excellence. The woman who had once been dismissed as just a cook had become a symbol of hidden potential within every community, proving that heroes often work quietly among us until the moment when everything depends on their willingness to act. Her legacy lived not in medals or recognition, but in the transformed lives of people who had learned from her example that genuine service required no audience beyond the knowledge that others were safer, stronger, and more hopeful because of consistent excellence performed with dignity and care. The kitchen at Mountain Ridge remained her chosen arena for daily battles against indifference and institutional dehumanization, where she continued winning victories that would never make headlines but sustained communities and inspired others to find meaning in their own opportunities to serve. The impossible shots had saved 47 lives in a few crucial minutes, but her ongoing service demonstrated the kind of heroism that built better societies one interaction at a time, proving that the greatest victories are often won by people who seek no reward beyond the satisfaction of work performed excellently for purposes that matter. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.